Geoscope for the new moon in Cancer, which happens on the 20th of July 2020. So this is going to be quite an interesting new moon. I think it's probably going to be a tale of two halves. This is the halfway point between the sort of in the solar eclipse cycle, the 6 months solar eclipse cycle. So I think what we're going to find is that we are transitioning out of that energy of release, which we had at the lunar eclipse in Capricorn, and we're moving more fully into the energy of the solar eclipse in Cancer energy. Now, this may be significant that this will be the second new moon that we have in Cancer, the first one being, of course, the solar eclipse in Cancer that we had on the 21st of June. So there is a kind of an element of twinning, mirroring, duality, doubling, as well as polarity that I think is going to characterize this particular lunar phase. So this is kind of reiterated on a number of levels. The first is, of course, Venus, which will still be in Gemini, so this is the sign of the twins. The second is the Sabian symbol, which is a Greek muse weighing newly born twins on golden scales. So interesting that we've got the scales here, which is obviously the scales of Libra, the scales of justice. So as I say, there's this strong theme of twinning and mirroring and polarity kind of going on, and it has been mirrored in the readings, and it will also be mirrored in the new moon itself. So the new moon will take place in Cancer, so the sun and moon will be in Cancer in your 10th house, but opposite that, almost exactly opposite that, will be Saturn in Capricorn. So Saturn in Capricorn was very prominent at the lunar eclipse in Capricorn, and this is because Saturn regressed back into the sign of Capricorn just before that lunar eclipse, and this time it's going to be keying into the solar lunar cycle through aspect, so through an opposition to the sun and the moon in Cancer. So there is going to be a need to balance out. Even though this is a new moon, I feel there's going to be a kind of a karmic balancing happening on some level, because of course Saturn is the lord of karma. But anyway, let's get into a reading and see what wants to come out, how this is likely to manifest, etc. So also, while I'm shuffling, I'll just mention that if you've been enjoying these readings and you are keen to experiment a little bit with geomancy, I have actually written an ebook called Oracle of the Elements, which is a practical guide to geomancy. And it's got everything in you need to start practicing yourself. So if that's something of interest to you, then do check out the link in the description box, which will take you to my website, and all the details about the ebook. There's also a free conversion chart that you can download on the same page. Okay, I think that's shuffled quite nicely. Let's cut the cards. And see what wants to come out. Wow. So interesting, Libra. This is, I think, very similar to the reading for Virgo. So it's possible that you've got Virgo placements. I would check out that Geoscope too if you do. So Fortuna Major is coming out in your first house. Now this is a really positive geomantic figure. It's similar to the sun in the tarot cards. So this is the sun in Leo energy, very kind of optimistic, successful. It's all about kind of success, happiness, recognition, joy, good fortune kind of coming away. So this is really fortune smiling on you, and this is where your intentions are when we start this particular phase. And given that you had such a positive reading, I think the last two readings, during the last two moon phases, I'm not surprised that you're feeling really kind of buoyant and looking forward to an optimistic time, a better period kind of going forward. Wow. So Acquisitio is coming out in your fourth house. So this is the house of roots, family, domestic situations, our private life, as well as ancestral ties, and gifts, of course, that we can inherit from family or from bloodlines, from genetics. So Acquisitio is Jupiter in Sagittarius. So fire energy, these are both fire signs actually. We've got the Sun in Leo and we've got Jupiter in Sagittarius. So this is very upbeat, optimistic, expansive energy. I think the best word for Jupiter is expansion. And you know, Sagittarius is very enthusiastic. It's all about the centaur kind of shooting his arrow up into the sky. So this is about looking to the future. Things are kind of looking up. You have great expectations, and you know, are just feeling very, very positive. The geomantic figure itself, Acquisitio, is often about gain. It's usually about financial gain. So it's possible that on some level you are being aware of the gifts and talents and skills that you've inherited from your family line, perhaps. You know, or it could be that you are, you know, inheriting a house, or that your family is kind of expanding, and that you feel very fortunate as a result of the wealth that that family brings. You know, so this may not necessarily be physical wealth, although it usually is. It can also be that sense of feeling lucky or fortunate as a result of our relationships with other people. So that's a really lovely figure to get there. Interesting. So when it comes to relationships, particularly committed partnerships and, you know, financial relationships, so this is usually one-to-one significant relationships governed by a contract of some kind. You seem to be ending a cycle. So again, this may have some tie to the lunar eclipse energy, where we were releasing certain things for the last 18 months to 2.5 years. So Counter-Draconis is about the end of cycles. It's about the end of karmic contracts. So I do feel as though when it comes to one-to-one relationships, there is either relationship coming to an end, or simply the soul lesson that you were meant to learn from certain significant others is kind of wrapping up. You're starting to see why certain people came into your life, what you learned from them, and vice versa. So not all negative. Interesting. Now when it comes to career, which is this is literally where the new moon is going to fall in your chart, we've got Populus, which is the Sun in Cancer. So it's reiterating this new moon energy that's going to be happening. So Populus is all about groups or crowds. So it can literally be, given that this is the house of reputation, fame, and career, that you are becoming well known. So on some level, this may continue the energy that we saw at the solar eclipse in Cancer, when, you know, as I said, we had that wonderful, you had Sirius kind of sitting in your 10th house, which is, you know, can be the house of fame and honors. So it could be that you are becoming well known within your field. It could be that you are your job or your career is taking you into a kind of public facing role, so you could be dealing with members of the public more, but it could also be to do with some sort of collective activity, a kind of a collaboration that involves a large group of people. But we'll find out more once I do the geometric conversions, so I'm just going to pause there and I'll be back in a minute. Hi Libra, welcome back. So I've done the conversions, and let's dive into your reading in a bit more depth. So as I was saying, this particular new moon will happen in your 10th house, which is the house of career, fame and honors, as well as public service, because sometimes, you know, this can also talk about you know, roles in the in government, or, you know, as an MP, that type of thing. So it can sometimes be about public service. So interesting here that we've got where the Sun and the Moon are going to be. We've got this geometric figure of Populus, which is the Sun in Cancer. Now, as I said, this is very often to do with groups of people. So it can be that there's a community element to whatever this is. It can also indicate that whatever you're doing has to do with diversity, or it could be performing in public places. So you could be, for example, you know, some kind of performance artist. But the other way that this can work is popularity, so an increase of people knowing about you. And it's interesting because we've got Populus repeated in your 2nd house. Now this is the house of both self-esteem as well as earned income. So it does look as if whatever you're doing has the potential to earn you some more money. Now that may be good news. So opposing that, or kind of asking for balance, is Saturn in your 4th house. Now Saturn is, as I said, in the sign of Capricorn, and it's interesting because Capricorn is actually exalted in the sign of Libra. So justice and the scales of justice and karma all have their kind of overlaps in the symbolism of Libra. So it seems as though whatever has happened in the past, that you seem to be kind of gaining. So you're kind of reaping rewards. So I think this is probably a case of karmic rebalancing. So where you know, there's that famous saying, bread thrown in the water of life comes back threefold. And I kind of feel as though whatever you've put in terms of effort in your private life, whether it's through family or, you know, just through exercising and utilizing your natural innate skills and talents, which possibly are inherited, gain is kind of coming from this. So Saturn here is quite positive. Now it could also be Jupiter, because Jupiter is also currently in the sign of Capricorn, and this acquisitio, this geomantic figure, is actually Jupiter in Sagittarius. So it could well be something to do with a very important Jupiter aspect which happens within about a week of this particular new moon, and that is the sextile to Neptune, which will be happening on around about the 27th of July. So we have had one iteration of this particular aspect. It happened around about the 20th of February. So you might want to cast your mind back, because whatever happens now may be a kind of natural development from whatever started at that point. And we will also have a follow-on, the third sort of iteration of this particular aspect around about the 12th of October. So there could well be a link, because of course October is Libra season. So it may also be that things don't necessarily finish or completely kind of manifest or culminate at this particular iteration. This could be an internal realization instead, because Jupiter and Neptune are both retrograde. So it could well be that the physical manifestation happens in October. So that's just something to bear in mind, because it seems as though you are closing out a cycle when it comes to work as well as health, because Counter Draconis is here. Now, Counter Draconis is the south node of the moon, and this is usually about releases or exits or endings of some kind, usually karmic. I tend to associate this more with full moons and with lunar eclipses. So it seems as though whatever happened at this full moon lunar eclipse that we had in a couple of weeks ago, there now seems to be a clearing out happening. And as I say, it could have to do with health, but more than likely I think it has to do with relationships, and that's because we have Counter Draconis also in your 7th house and in your 11th house. Now this is the house of committed partnerships. They can be business partnerships, and this is the house of professional associations as well as friends. So this is kind of social connections, and this is one-to-one connections. And given that we've got this link to the 6th house, which can be, as I say, work or work colleagues, our kind of everyday working schedule, rituals, environment, the everyday job that we do, there may be something that is clearing out. And this could be why you are moving into this populist energy. Maybe you're changing jobs, and this is, potentially going to cause changes when it comes to the workplace. It could also be that, as I say, that there are certain things that are kind of shifting for you when it comes to relationships, particularly friendships and committed partnerships. Now, these don't necessarily have to be people. It isn't always the case that people are shifting out of our lives. Sometimes it's we're realizing certain karmic lessons that some relationships have taught us about a particular dynamic that may not necessarily have been that good for us, healthy for us, etc. And now we're kind of letting it go. So sometimes that means that people leave our lives, but sometimes it just means that our relationships with them change. Now, kind of further to that, we do have some other interesting things happening in your 3rd, your 5th and your 9th house, and that is conjunctio. So this is, whenever we get reiterations of geomantic figures, I always tend to pay attention. So we've got conjunctio happening 3 times in this particular reading. Now, conjunctio on a whole usually means alliances, so this can mean contracts or working with people, but it can also mean marriage, so union. This can sometimes mean romantic union, and I think that we could read the conjunctio both ways. So if we look at the 3rd and the 9th house, this could mean contract negotiations of some kind, possibly to do with, say, a publishing contract or with a media kind of organization, to do with something that is creative. That's one way this energy could work. Or it could be that you are moving into, you're coming together with, you know, potentially a new romantic partner, somebody that you are communicating with, and who may either be of a different culture to you, because ninth house can often mean foreign connections, or who may live at a distance from you. That's the other way that this energy could work. But definitely there is an emphasis on union, on coming together, on alliances, on collaboration. So that may well pertain to whatever this this changing cycle is for you here in your 11th, your 6th and your 7th houses. But the upshot is positivity. You know, we do have some interesting energy here. We've got Rubeus, for example, as one of your outcome cards, and Rubeus usually passion. So it could well be that there's some sort of new passionate connection that you are making contact with, you know, that there's communication with you kind of happening, or it could be a passion, you know, a passion project, and this could be where populace comes in. That's something that you are kind of doing on your own, starts to take off. So that's something to be aware of, but it leads to happiness because we've got Lightisha here, which is Jupiter in Pisces. So Pisces energy for you, as I say, is this is, you know, could have to do with the 6th house, but you know, I think it's definitely saying that you're heading towards more happiness. I mean, Lightisha is grace, flow, joy, enthusiasm, happiness. So it's about expansion within the emotional body, and positivity in the emotional body. This may also relate to family because we do have Jupiter here. So that's something else to consider, and it could well be that this has to do with children or a child. So maybe there is a conception or pregnancy happening here. That's, you know, one way that your family dynamic could be expanding. So yes, lots kind of going on, but the upshot is that by the end of this lunar cycle, you're definitely going to feel more supported, and that could either be by the universe. So this 9th house could be coming together with higher source, or with spirit guides, for example, or it could mean that you feel more support from the public, in which case, you know, it could be from this either kind of like a community-based project or something that is crowd-funded. That could be why we've got populace here in your 2nd house. Or it could simply be that you're feeling more supported by relationships, and that's why we've got these shifts happening within your 7th, your 11th, and you know, and your 3rd house. But you know, ultimately, I think a very, again, quite a positive outcome. I mean, Rubeus you can sometimes read as being negative, or where we kind of get a little bit stuck in toxic energy, but there's not a lot in this reading that is negative. The only thing I could possibly say here is that you've got a Missio, which is Venus and Taurus in your 8th house. So this is the house of sex, death and taxes, as well as boundaries with other people. Hi Libra, sorry about that. For some reason my camera decided to stop working. So anyway, as I was saying, so when it comes to a Missio, sometimes it can indicate you know, like theft, financial ruin, loss, transience, separations, breakups. But I think, you know, because this is 8th house, it's more to do with often to do with shared resources. So it can be that, for example, we entered into a financial relationship with somebody that didn't turn out to be to our advantage. It could be a contract that you know, was not really that favorable to us, so it can sometimes have something to do with lawsuits, but I don't know if that's the case here. I just think it may have something to do with either self-destructive behavior, so for example tending to go after people that are emotionally unavailable, or kind of trusting the wrong people, but you know, other than that, we don't really have anything that's negative in this reading, and I kind of feel though that, you know, even though there may have been disappointments in the past, you're leaving those behind, because we've got Cauda Draconis here in your 7th house, your 6th house, and your 11th house. So, you know, if people have disappointed you, that's certainly an energy that's leaving. So this, as I say, could be more to do with a passion project. And, you know, we've got a happiness indicated here when it comes to emotions. So that's family, you know, long-term relationships and friendships. So I think it's more to do with a cycle of unhappiness or self-sabotage that's leaving rather than anything else. But as I say, the upshot is that when it comes to the end of the cycle, you're going to feel a lot more supported, and this, I think, points more to relationships than it does necessarily to financial support. So you could feel more supported by the public, you could feel more supported by friends, you could feel more supported by spouses or financial partners, by children, lovers, and by family, particularly by family, I think, because we've got such a positive outcome here, and we've got so much energy, you know, in your 10th house. So you know, I don't think that it's necessarily anything that negative, but do go back and watch the geoscopes for the last two lunar phases, because I think the solstice reading in particular will be important to, you know, and feed into and supplement what we've got here. And then, you know, also kind of bear in mind the astrology, because you know, that can also add another layer of meaning that can help us to discern what's kind of going on in the below. You know, astrology is the above, but it pertains to the below. It's just that the way that it manifests for everybody in the 3D is, you know, often quite individual. But anyway, I hope this has resonated and been helpful. If it has, do hit the like button or leave me a comment. And if you are enjoying geomancy and you want to know more, then don't forget about my ebook, which you can find details about in the description box. But anyway, I'm wishing you all the best for this upcoming lunar cycle, and I'll catch you again in a couple of weeks for my full moon reading.